The voice came from the back of the studio, and Melissa McCarthy's world stopped. Jimmy Fallon had been laughing. That big, genuine laugh that had made him America's favorite late-night host. Melissa was in the middle of a story. Something funny about a movie set disaster. The kind of anecdote that would normally have the audience in stitches. She was animated, gesturing wildly with her hands, her timing perfect. And then she heard it. A single word called out from somewhere near the studio entrance. Missy, not Melissa. Not McCarthy. Missy, the nickname only one person in the world used anymore. Her hands froze mid-gesture. The smile vanished from her face. Her head turned sharply toward the back left corner of the studio, away from the cameras, away from Jimmy, away from everything. The audience sensed the shift immediately. 300 people who had been laughing seconds ago fell silent. The Roots stopped playing. Questlove lowered his drumsticks. Jimmy's laugh died in his throat. Melissa McCarthy, one of Hollywood's most powerful comedic forces, sat completely motionless in the guest chair, staring at something no one else could see yet. Jimmy's laugh froze. The orchestra went silent and 300 audience members held their breath because Melissa McCarthy recognized that voice from the back of the studio. To understand what happened next, you need to understand what happened 17 years earlier. Melissa McCarthy wasn't always the confident, beloved actress who commanded movie screens and award shows. In 2008, she was a working actress, steady jobs, recognizable face, but not yet a household name. She had a recurring role on a sitcom, some commercial work, enough to pay rent in Los Angeles, but nothing close to stardom. She was also engaged to Ben Falcon, her longtime boyfriend. They'd met years earlier in a comedy class, fallen in love over shared dreams and late-night diner conversations about the kind of careers they wanted to build. Ben was an actor, too. Navigating the same uncertain waters of auditions and rejection, they planned a simple wedding. Nothing extravagant, just close friends and family at a small venue in Los Angeles. Melissa's parents would fly in from Illinois. Ben's family from Illinois, too. Everyone was thrilled. Everyone except Melissa's older brother, Marcus. Marcus McCarthy had struggled his entire adult life. Not with lack of talent or ambition. He was brilliant, actually, with a sharp mind for engineering and a dry wit that could make Melissa laugh until she cried. But he struggled with addiction. Alcohol first, then pills, then harder substances that pulled him further and further from the life he'd once imagined for himself. The family had tried everything. Interventions, rehab programs. Melissa had paid for treatment centers more times than she could count. Always hoping this time would be different. Marcus would get clean for a few months, sometimes even a year, and then something would trigger a relapse and he'd disappear again. 3 months before Melissa's wedding, Marcus relapsed hard. He vanished from his apartment in Chicago, stopped answering phone calls, missed family dinners. Their mother was frantic. Their father drove around Chicago neighborhoods looking for him. Melissa was terrified. She called hospitals. She called the police. She called every friend Marcus had ever mentioned. Nothing. 2 weeks before the wedding, Marcus finally called. He was in bad shape. Melissa could hear it in his voice. That hollow quality that meant he was using again. He was somewhere in Nevada. He said he didn't have money for a bus ticket. He didn't know if he could get clean in time for the wedding. Marcus, please. Melissa begged, sitting in her small Los Angeles apartment, phone pressed to her ear, tears streaming down her face. I need you there. You're my brother. I can't get married without you. I want to be there, Missy, he said, using that old childhood nickname. I really do. But I can't let you see me like this. I don't care what you look like. I don't care about any of that. I just need you there. There was a long pause. Then Marcus said something that would haunt Melissa for years. You deserve better than a brother like me showing up to your wedding. He hung up. Melissa tried calling back. The number was disconnected. She got married 2 weeks later in that small Los Angeles venue. Her parents were there. Ben's family, close friends from the comedy world. It was beautiful. Everyone cried during the vows. The reception was full of laughter and dancing. But when Melissa looked out at the assembled guests, when she scanned the room during the father-daughter dance, when she gave her speech thanking everyone for coming, there was a hole where Marcus should have been. An absence that acted more than she'd imagined possible. She smiled through it. She laughed at the toasts. She danced with Ben. She played the role of happy bride perfectly because that's what she learned to do as an actress. Perform even when your heart is breaking. After the wedding, she tried to find Marcus. More phone calls, more searches, nothing. He'd vanished completely. 3 months later, her career exploded. She got cast in Bridesmaids. The movie became a massive hit. Suddenly, Melissa McCarthy was everywhere. Magazine covers, award shows, movie offers flooding in. Her life transformed overnight. She used her new resources to search for Marcus. Private investigators, national databases. She put out quiet word through recovery networks across the country. She never stopped looking. Years passed, more movies, more success. She and Ben had children, 2 beautiful daughters who would never know their Uncle Marcus, who asked questions about him that Melissa struggled to answer. How do you explain to a child that sometimes people get lost and can't find their way back? Melissa never talked about Marcus publicly. It was too private, too painful. Her career was built on making people laugh. And talking about her missing brother didn't fit that narrative, so she compartmentalized. She kept working. She kept being funny. She kept that wound hidden. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. 17 years later, Melissa was one of the biggest stars in Hollywood. Multiple Oscar nominations, blockbuster movies, her own production company. She had achieved everything she and Marcus used to dream about in their parents' living room when they were kids. Tonight, she was on The Tonight Show to promote her latest film. It was supposed to be fun. Jimmy always made her laugh. The audience loved her. These appearances were easy at this point in her career. She'd walked onto the stage to massive applause, hugged Jimmy, settled into the guest chair. They'd been talking for maybe 3 minutes. She was telling a story about her daughters, something funny they'd said on set. The audience was eating it up. And then that voice from the back of the studio, Missy. In the back left corner near the entrance where audience members usually lined up before taping, stood a man in his 50s. Jeans, simple button-down shirt, graying hair, thinner than he should be, the way people get when life has been hard. His hand was raised in a small, uncertain wave. Studio security had stopped him, hands on his arms, ready to escort him out for disrupting the taping. But something made them pause. Maybe the way Melissa had frozen. Maybe the look on her face. Marcus McCarthy had been living in Nevada for 17 years. He'd been homeless for stretches. He'd been in and out of treatment centers. He'd worked at jobs, construction, dishwashing, anything that paid cash, and didn't ask too many questions. He'd gotten clean 3 years ago, really clean this time, and had been terrified to reach out to his family, because how do you explain a 17-year absence? How do you come back from that? He'd been watching his sister's career from a distance, seeing her movies in dollar theaters, reading interviews and magazines left behind in waiting rooms, proud beyond words, ashamed beyond measure. 2 months ago, he'd gotten a job at a hotel in Los Angeles, steady work, a small apartment, something like a normal life. He'd been working up the courage to contact Melissa, writing and rewriting letters he never sent, practicing phone calls he never made. Tonight, walking home from his shift, he'd pass Rockefeller Center. He'd seen the Tonight Show logo and something, call it impulse, call it fate, call it 17 years of regret finally becoming unbearable, made him go to the stage door and ask if he could get a ticket. "We're fully booked," the assistant said. "But if you come back at 5 p.m., sometimes we have last-minute cancellations." He'd waited for 3 hours standing in the New York cold. He'd waited. A ticket became available. He'd taken it. He'd sat in the back during the first segment, just watching his sister on that screen. So close, but still impossibly far away. And when Jimmy introduced her for the second segment, when Melissa walked out to applause and sat down just 50 feet away from him, Marcus had felt 17 years of words pile up in his throat. He promised himself he'd just watch. He wouldn't disrupt anything. He'd leave quietly, and maybe find the courage to contact her properly later. But then she was telling that story about her daughters, and she laughed. That specific laugh he remembered from childhood. The one that scrunched up her nose and Marcus couldn't hold it in anymore. Missy, behind the scenes, Jimmy made a decision that defied every producer's expectation. The studio was frozen. Every camera operator was waiting for direction from the control room. The producers were screaming into headsets, trying to figure out what was happening. Cut to commercial. Keep rolling. What was the protocol for a moment like this? Jimmy Fallon looked at Melissa's face and understood immediately that something profound was occurring. He'd interviewed thousands of guests. He knew the difference between performance and reality. "Melissa," he said softly, his host's voice gone, replaced by something genuine. "Do you know that person?" Melissa couldn't speak, couldn't move. Tears were streaming down her face, her hands gripping the armrests of the guest chair so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Jimmy made eye contact with the security guards at the back. He held up one hand, the universal gesture for wait. Then he stood up, stepped out from behind his desk, and walked toward the back of the studio. The cameras followed him. The audience turned in their seats. No one knew what was happening, but everyone understood it was real. Jimmy reached Marcus, who looked terrified, who clearly thought he'd made a terrible mistake, who was starting to back toward the exit. "Hey," Jimmy said quietly. "What's your name?" "Marcus. I'm her brother. I didn't mean to. I shouldn't have. Does she know you're here?" Marcus shook his head. "I haven't seen her in 17 years. Jimmy processed this for exactly 2 seconds. Then he turned back toward the stage and called out, "Melissa, your brother is here." But this is the moment no one in the studio and no one watching at home ever saw coming. Melissa stood up. The movement was sudden. Chair scraping back. She stepped off the platform, stumbled slightly in her heels, kicked them off without breaking stride. She was running, actually running, across the studio floor toward the back corner. The audience erupted, not in applause, not yet. In that collective gasp that happens when 300 people witness something authentic, some were crying. Most had their hands over their mouths. Marcus took one step forward, then another. His face was crumpling. 17 years of held-together composure, finally shattering. They collided in the aisle between audience sections. Melissa grabbed her brother and held on like he might disappear again as
she loosened her grip. Marcus wrapped his arms around his sister and sobbed into her shoulder. Loud, body-shaking sobs that the boom microphones caught with devastating clarity. "I'm sorry," Marcus kept saying. "I'm so sorry. I missed your wedding. I missed everything. I'm so sorry." "You're here now," Melissa said, pulling back to look at his face, her hands cupping his cheeks the way their mother used to do when they were children. "You're here. That's all that matters. You're here." Jimmy Fallon stood 10 feet away, tears streaming down his face, not even trying to hide it. The cameras kept rolling. The control room had stopped shouting. Everyone understood they were witnessing something that transcended television. Jimmy reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his Blue Note cards, the cards he used for every interview with questions and jokes written in his own handwriting. He walked over to Melissa and Marcus, still holding each other. "Melissa," Jimmy said, his voice thick with emotion, "I want you to have these." She looked at him confused. "What? These cards? I write on them every night. Jokes, questions, things I want to remember. I want you to have them for tonight. Write down everything you want to say to your brother. Write down everything you've been holding for 17 years. Don't lose these words again." Melissa took the cards with shaking hands. She looked down at Jimmy's handwriting, then up at his tear-stained face. "Thank you," she whispered. Jimmy addressed the studio audience. "Folks, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, I think we're going to have a different kind of show tonight." The audience stood, all of them, applauding, crying, bearing witness to this moment of reunion and forgiveness and impossible second chances. During the commercial break, Jimmy had his production team bring chairs onto the stage. Not the host desk, not the guest chair, just 3 simple chairs arranged in a circle. One for Melissa, one for Marcus, one for Jimmy. When they came back from commercial, Jimmy explained to the television audience what had happened. Marcus sat between his sister and the host, still holding Melissa's hand, still looking like he couldn't believe this was real. "Marcus," Jimmy said gently, "can you tell us where you've been?" And Marcus told a story. Not all of it. 17 years can't be compressed into minutes, but enough. The addiction, the shame, the 3 years of being clean, the hotel job, the courage it took to walk through that door. Melissa never let go of his hand. When Marcus finished, Jimmy did something unexpected. He reached up, loosened his tie, and pulled it off. He handed it to Marcus. "My dad gave me this tie," Jimmy said quietly. "He told me to wear it on important nights. I want you to have it. A reminder that you showed up." Marcus clutched the tie, tears streaming down his face. The 3 of them sat on that stage and created a moment of such raw humanity that millions would watch it over and over, remembering what forgiveness looks like. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. 6 months later, Marcus walked Melissa down the red carpet at her premiere. He'd been clean for 3.5 years. He was working full-time. He'd met his nieces. And in his pocket, he carried Jimmy Fallon's tie always.